live and direct from anywhere in the world. It's The Kelley Show with Dr. Kelley Mondesire.
Hello, and welcome back to The Kelley Show. Real people with real stories in real time. And I am here in sunny South Carolina, USA. And as we get into and launch the holiday season, one of my favorite things to indulge in is Scotch whiskey. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I think maybe I should just buy some stock in the Scotch whiskey. Well, today I have a very special guest who is going to tell us about Scotch whiskey as an investment. So I would like to welcome my guest, Mr. Taylor Costa van Putten, who is the president of Braeburn Whisky USA. Welcome to the show, Taylor.
Thank you, Kelley, for having me. Really a privilege to be here. Extremely exciting year for you, obviously, with getting a cool podcast up and running and moving to paradise and everything else. So glad to be a part of it. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, you're most welcome, and thank you. It's a privilege to have you on the show today. So Taylor, tell our viewers, where are you from and where are you now, and a little bit about your background and how you became involved in whiskey as an investment.
Sure. You know, it's been an interesting journey. I'm from all over the place. You know, I was born in California, Southern California, spent some time there and grew up in Massachusetts and then back to California with my family as a young person. After that, I decided I wanted to pack up and move to New York City and get my education and come up in the world. And, you know, found some other career opportunities in Salt Lake City, Utah, of all places, which I also love. Chased that to Seattle, Washington, and met my future wife there. And, you know, we're both sort of New Yorkers. So we decided that we wanted to pack up and get back to our spiritual home. So that's landed me where I am today, which is New York City, together with my wife. How on earth did I get involved in whiskey investing? Also a great question. I am a licensed and registered securities broker, as well as a formerly registered investment advisor, and been operating in the industry for most of a decade in traditional wealth management as well as alternative assets. And as of 2 years ago, was helping to bring art investment to the public, fine art investment, multi-million-dollar paintings to investors who want to diversify. And from there, a very interesting pair of global entrepreneurs based out of Scotland found me and, you know, effectively asked if I wanted to bring a new asset class to America in a way that's never been done before. So obviously I couldn't turn down the exciting challenge, not to mention that I'm about 40% Scottish. So I had to do the right thing for my ancestors. But, you know, Scotch whiskey is a serious investment. And as an investment professional, it's my job to educate people on it and make it accessible here in the United States, because it really never has been before, despite being such an attractive asset class for many people.
Well, I met you several months ago at an event, and an Irish-Scottish event in New York City. And when I heard about what you were doing in Braeburn Whisky, I was so intrigued because I had never heard of this before. And as a whiskey lover, you shared this incredible investment opportunity. So can you tell the viewers about Braeburn, what it is, its uniqueness, and how does it all work? How does investing in Scotch whiskey actually work?
Sure. You know, Braeburn is, we believe, the world's premier and possibly the world's first whiskey investment firm or brokerage, bringing whiskey as an asset or an investment to the general public. Now, most Americans, even though people love whiskey here, most that I talk to have never heard the words whiskey and investment next to each other. So very novel concept here, but very, very simple. You know, to explain it very roughly, almost everybody, no matter how much whiskey you drink, almost everybody knows that when you go to the liquor store, you know, you look at the whiskey shelf and you see that the whiskey, they have ages on them, right? 12-year-old whiskey, an 18-year-old, 25, 30. And what you're going to see when you look at the price tags is the older a whiskey gets, the more crazily expensive it gets, right? So it's a valuable way to potentially profit off of maturation. So how do you make an old whiskey and how do you profit off of it? The only way to mature whiskey is by pouring the spirit into a wooden barrel and waiting. There's no cheats. There's no shortcuts. You have to let the whiskey sit and mature. You've got to take good care of it over time. You got to protect it. But we help people make money and protect their wealth in that marketplace, in that economy, by acting as a broker, connecting qualified investors with barrels full of Scotch whiskey or spirit. Those investors simply own their barrels outright. They're taken care of in warehouses in Scotland as required by law. And then eventually, however many years later, our investors are going to sell their barrels, and we help with that too, and they take a profit. Well, that's it. It's very similar to investing in most other long-term capital appreciation investments. It's like buying a Picasso painting and selling it. It's like buying a land and letting the neighborhood develop around it and then selling it some years later. It's like buying a forest. So it's the same mechanics as most other investments in asset classes. It's just taking advantage of the attractive economics of premium whiskey.
Okay. Well, I've been on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange numerous times, and I've also been on the trading desks of various banks down in the Wall Street area. But I want Gareth, our producer, to put up a photo of your office because you have the most unusual trading desk I've ever visited. This is Taylor's office. This is in New York City. And can you tell me a little bit about how how you seek out your clients, how your clients seek you, and what's going on in the office? What usually goes on in a typical day in Taylor's office?
Funny you mentioned the stock exchange. We just had some representatives from the New York Stock Exchange here literally last week for a whiskey tasting that they had won at a charitable auction that we did. So they came straight from their trading floor down on Wall Street to our trading floor up here in Midtown Manhattan in New York City. But you can see behind me and in the pictures here, this is what we call the Braeburn Whisky Investment Vault. And this is my office. This is where I come to work every day. This is where deals get done. This is where investors acquire or buy or sell barrels of whiskey through us as whiskey brokers. We call it the Whiskey Vault or the Whiskey Investment Vault because it's a private space. It's invitation only. We really don't let people in here except for very special occasions or for our active investors, people who have come on board so that we can share great whiskey with them and celebrate their investments. And help educate them on everything that Scotland and Scotch whiskey has to offer. But this is where we work every day. Myself and my team in operations and portfolio management. So this is where all the magic happens. And you've been here as well, obviously, and had some great whiskeys to share with us.
Oh, it was a privilege and an honor, and I had such a fun time. The two experiences I had in the vault. And tell me, what are the criteria that an individual must have to qualify as a client? Because this is just not something for everyone. There's a protocol involved here, and why?
Right. So to clarify, this is the Whiskey Investment Vault. It is invitation only, but we're very happy to meet new people, especially folks who love whiskey. So if anybody's in the New York area, whether you're legally qualified or not, which I'll talk about in just a moment, Gareth and Kelly will put my contact information on. Send me an email or submit an application online. We'd love to have you by for a whiskey just to chat and meet you and find out whether this makes sense for you or just have a great conversation. But as an investment, like many things in the United States, the SEC has rules. This is considered a private investment because you can't list whiskey on the New York Stock Exchange. There's no infrastructure in place for that. So this is a private investment, and the SEC therefore has rules about who's legally able to participate. Now, the rules simply say that a person has to be considered what's called an accredited investor. That generally just means you're meeting certain financial or education or licensing qualifications. So a person just either needs to be earning $200,000 in annual income individually themselves, or they could be earning $300,000 in annual income jointly with their spouse, or they have a net worth of $1 million, excluding the residence or the house where they live, or maybe you're actually a licensed registered securities broker or investment advisor, Series 7, Series 66, 65, which means you have some sophistication in evaluating investments. So all that being said, roughly 10% of the American population actually meets those criteria. So there are many millions of people that can and do have the ability to come on board in whiskey investing. Now, as far as is whiskey appropriate for you individually, we're not going to talk about that on this podcast, because I need to work with every individual investor to understand their circumstances and whether whiskey can benefit them. But I can say that likely the majority of qualified people that I talk to can benefit strategically from whiskey in some way.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that information. And I asked you this earlier before we went on air, and it just never occurred to me. Well, when you invest in whiskey and you're investing in a cask or a barrel, how many liters of whiskey is in, say, a barrel, or, you know, how do these measurements go? Please educate me and our viewers.
You know, Scotch whiskey is really unique in that they take barrels from all over the world. You know, whiskey will often, when it matures in a barrel, take on some of the characteristics of that wood, obviously. That's part of the maturation process. But sometimes you can use whiskey that's had wine in it, or IPA beer, or champagne, or Japanese whiskey, or all kinds of things. And so whiskey barrels that are used for maturation will be sourced from all over the globe. And different countries and different industries have different standards. But there are three main categories of barrels that are used, especially in Scotland and in the global whiskey industry. A standard barrel is around 200 liters, and that gets you, 200 to 250 bottles, depending on how old it is, and a couple other factors. Sometimes if you want to slow down the maturation process, you might use what's called a hogshead, which is 250 liters of liquid inside of it. And then lastly, no giggling, the largest size of barrel that is used commonly in Scotland is 500 liters, and that's called a butt. Don't ask me where that name came from.
I can't stop giggling. I think that's hysterical. But now my next question is, there are, you said, I believe, 6 different regions of Scotland where whiskey is produced. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. Historically, Scotland has been divided into 6 whiskey producing regions, which cover the entire country. And some whiskey regions are very large and some are very, very small. But these regions are important not only just for their history and their heritage and their character, but because the Scotch Whisky Association actually vigorously protects how you can label your whiskey. You know, if you reside or your distillery is physically, geographically in one region, you can only label your whiskey with that region, right? Now, the 6 regions are the Highlands, the Lowlands, the Islands, Islay, Campbelltown. The last is Speyside, globally one of the largest whiskey producing regions in the world. Now, there often are broad characteristics of these different regions, but there are 50 different single malt distilleries across Scotland, scattered throughout these different regions, and 150 total that don't produce necessarily only single malt. So there's a lot of diversity in flavor, character, production, and levels of premium that are associated. But when we have investors that are on board come to our whiskey vault, what you can see here in the picture is a photo of our whiskey casino table, where we're always going to give our new investors a whiskey tour of the 6 regions of Scotland and help them understand all of the beautiful history and the character that can be had from just the 3 simple ingredients that go into making Scotch whiskey. Scotch is one of the most regulated and also one of the purest spirits in the world, because single malt Scotch is only made of 3 ingredients. It's water, barley, and yeast, and time in a barrel.
When your clients or prospective clients visit the vault and they taste different whiskeys from different regions, do you find that they invest based on their taste, or they've visited this particular section of Scotland, or they're of Scottish descent, or what speaks to your clients when you're putting together an investment portfolio within this sector? You know,
very rarely are people relying on personal preferences in whiskey when they're financially investing. Our job as a broker and effectively a portfolio manager or whiskey wealth advisor is to do the work and the due diligence to determine what distilleries, what whiskeys, what ages, what strategies make the most sense for any given investor. So, I make recommendations based on all kinds of financial and strategic requirements that our clients have. And generally people get invested based on, those factors, not necessarily what tastes good. Now, we only work with distilleries that have great whiskey. We actually have a selection of distilleries that we prefer to work with because we're directly contracted with them to help them get their whiskey into investors' hands at the best possible deal for investors. So no, most people are going to follow our advice and our recommendation because we have that history, that experience, and the knowledge to be able to make sound recommendations. But obviously, if they happen to align with the things you know and love, that's great. You can also go visit your distillery and even see your casks, or in many cases, take a sample when you're in Scotland next. And we encourage everybody to do that. And
do you curate those visits, those tours?
Absolutely. We're a Scottish business. We love and really roll out the red carpet for people coming to see Scotland. So that's our job is to, not just focus on whiskey as, an item in a spreadsheet, a financial investment or something in your portfolio. But at the end of the day, this is whiskey. It's in a barrel now, but someday somebody's going to drink this stuff. And our investors have a key part to play in that whiskey production process, which is making great whiskey through, their financial support of the industry. Everybody gets to win. Our investors make money. The distilleries get to make more great whiskey. And someday somebody gets to enjoy some fantastic bottles of great single malt.
Well, invite me to that party. But speaking of your clientele, what other common interests do you find your clients have? What's your general demographic?
Scotch whiskey is not a majority spirit in America. It's a very select audience because Scotch whiskey is a premium product. It is significantly more valuable, significantly more expensive. And in many cases, there is more care put into the production and more time put into the production of great single malt Scotch whiskey than other spirits in America. So our investors tend to be people who have tastes for sophisticated, premium, luxury goods and products. Our investors, by law, generally have to be higher net worth, but the people that we tend to work with are, founders, business executives, entrepreneurs, people who have very refined tastes, people who love beautiful art, people who love great real estate and architecture. And often our real estate investors, skilled and experienced professionals who are at the peak of their careers, lawyers, doctors, et cetera. So these people like great whiskey. They love to pair it with great art, beautiful events, great music, great cigars, sexy cars, all things that I think you mostly appreciate as well. But those are our people. Our investors are not only interesting people, but they make interesting investments. And they tend to really love whiskey, although, we've got plenty of people that don't even drink or don't necessarily enjoy Scotch or whiskey, period.
Well, I've been trying to lay off the cigars, but you can't get me away from the whiskey. I have another question. It might be a little bit of a provocative question. Given global warming and how different products such as wine, olives, olive oil, how global warming is affecting different types of crops, have you seen any changes or any long-term schematics, excuse the expression, or long-term planning based on global warming, barley production, yeast? Has any of that come into play in your investment strategies going forward? And where do you see this market in the next 10 years or so?
Yeah, climate change is going to be a very real concern in many industries that involve, agriculture. Whiskey, especially in Scotland, is going to be pretty resilient, although there will have to be adaptations as time goes on. One of the things you can think about is there's a really big difference in whiskey distillation production versus things like wine, right? Now, imagine you're a French vineyard. Your vineyard is this plot of land that's maybe been in your family for hundreds of years, but it's been in the same place on earth. Your land, your terroir, your vines is the character of your wine. Now, suddenly, if the latitude that you're at is got different temperatures or varying temperatures year over year, well, how do you make a consistent product, or how do you maintain the quality that's expected of you year over year? So there's very little that can be done to mitigate this in industries like wine or champagne. You can't pack up your terroir and move it, north or anything like that. Now, the thing with whiskey is barley production, it's an input commodity for these distilleries. Not that many distilleries actually grow their own barley. It does happen, but it's pretty rare. They're generally buying the cultivars of barley that they want and sourcing them from throughout Scotland, or even in many cases all over the world, to get the highest quality barley available that works with their distillation process to get the product that they want. So, barley legally can and is sourced from wherever the quality is. And so will global warming affect where and how barley is produced? Definitely. But there is flexibility in the industry on how you can source your barley. And, that's one of the things that makes this a relatively uncorrelated asset when it comes to climate change. The distillation process itself and how much care and artistry goes into it and how much quality control you have over the final product also means that, you can make a very specific output spirit just by tinkering with the temperature, the time, the waiting periods, the cooling, the heating. So no matter what inputs you have, the sugar levels, the other enzymes, you can have the skilled operators that are running all the distillation machines and stills create a fairly consistent product no matter where they're getting their barley from.
And hence it's resilient as we go on in time with climate change and other factors. And I hope our viewers have learned quite a bit from you today, not only about whiskey, how it's produced, what's going on in terms of production, but also whiskey as quite the sturdy and resilient investment. So we have a tradition on the show. I ask all of our guests if you can name one person, place, thing, or experience that you are grateful or thankful for. Who or what would it be?
If I was accepting an Oscar or any other big award, I would absolutely, just like here, have to shout out my wife, who has been enormously impactful on my journey in my personal life, in my relationships, in the way that I view the world, in my priorities, in my career, and how I view myself. So I am very, very grateful that I had the opportunity to meet a very special woman several years ago, and that she agreed to be my partner forever and come to New York with me. But it's really shifted the way that I view and prioritize moving through the world and the universe and what's most important. And I think that having great people in your life, whether it's your main partner or whether it's great friends and colleagues like you, Kelley, my wife has been a really important part of that journey for me.
And would you want to share your wife's name with us?
My wife's name is Leda, L-E-D-A, Leda.
Oh, what a beautiful name. That's a lovely name. Well, hello, Leah. Well, Taylor, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. It's been an incredible learning experience today. And folks, if you would like to reach out to Taylor, we have his contact information up for you here. Call him up, stop by appointment, of course, to the Vault. I have to tell you, it is a lovely, amazing space in the middle of New York City. You would never know you were in New York City. I mean, you go thousands of miles away and you feel like you are in Scotland. So reach out to Taylor. And thank you very much once again for being a guest on The Kelley Show. And if you like whiskey, don't forget the holidays are coming up. Buy a bottle, share it with a few friends, and maybe play this episode for your friends of The Kelley Show, and everyone can learn from Taylor with a glass of whiskey. So Taylor, thanks again. And folks, if you would like to be on The Kelley Show, write in with your email information, contact information, your story, and why you would like to be on The Kelley Show. And don't forget to subscribe to The Kelley Show and never miss an episode. We're on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn, but primarily subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can watch the rerun of my conversation with my very special guest, Taylor Costa van Putten. He is the president of Braeburn Whisky USA. It's been a pleasure, and happy holidays as they're coming up. Whatever you do, celebrate, be safe, be happy. Gareth, take it away. Peace and love.
If you would like to be a guest on The Kelley Show, send us an email with your contact information, where in the world you are, and a brief description of the story you'd like to share today.